Hi, I'm IKEA, and for today's video, we'll be diving into MMRs in this in-depth look. It is in the series of DPS that we're kind of going here, and also in the DPS folder is where this file kind of lives. But of course, with the MMRs, we're actually not going to concern ourselves much with DPS. That doesn't really make sense the way that we use them. We're much more concerned about their headhunting capabilities, and that is what this is set up for. In stark difference to the previous one where with Project Resolve, where we had one of these lists as well, I basically had shots taken in-game, taking screenshots of those and just bringing it over and just inputting them. For a one-time thing, that was kind of fine. Here, we've actually set up a fully working calculator for Headhunter, getting ourselves the first shot, that's the second shot, and then the cap shot, usually as well with hotshot here. The third shot will be the cap shot, but sometimes with other builds, especially without perfect Headhunter, and not any other big bonuses, you might not actually, you might not reach the cap shot as the third shot. And yeah, we're kind of comparing, especially here, all of the bolt action weapons. We're not really looking at the auto-firing tree that exists in MMRs now as well. Mostly because those, we can just compare them on their DPS, and we'll be using them much more as well in a DPS sense than we would, for instance, with these. And then here as well, we'll be comparing two different build setups. One is going to be a Chainkiller+Airaldi with Airaldi backpack and then Vigilance. And then the other one is going to be two-piece Habsburg version. They are in separate tabs here, just at the bottom with spreadsheets. They're at the bottom. So yeah, we're going to jump around between those. As with always with these in-depth looks, everything's going to be timestamped, so you can jump around as you wish. And then as well, everything will be linked down in the description as well, including the main folder that all of these tables live in, and then also this table specifically. Let's go get started with our premise, and then we'll go into the build, and then we'll start looking into the Chainkiller+Airaldi version first, then the Habsburg version. Then as well, we'll have at the end, as always with these in-depth looks into weapon types, we'll go to my stash and we'll kind of go weapon by weapon, and kind of I will give my final thoughts, basically my conclusions based upon these numbers on those weapons. And that might also be the point you may want to jump to if you kind of aren't interested in the full story but just want more the conclusion of it. That will be basically in that MMR review, so you can hop over to that timestamp. So yeah, let's go get started with our premise. And as always, to kind of set our scope and premise here, we are kind of going for one, well, actually two builds then here, but very specifically set up, and also with a specific set of weapons, although only the bolt actions, as we kind of discussed. We're leaving out the auto-firing ones, mostly because they, if we were to just look at the burst and sustain tables as we have them, they're kind of, their burst and sustain tables are kind of accurate. All of them as well. They don't have any differences per se in their modding, except that the SVD takes a different Big Mag than the SOCOM and the G28, but we can kind of go off of this, and honestly, we can kind of be brief about them as well. The SVD is really the only one we can make accurate enough and kind of handleable enough out of these to be marginally usable with, and by extension, a little bit the Dread Edict. But honestly, they're not great usable tools in any real way, the auto MMRs. But the bolt actions very much are, and then especially as well for headhunting. And then that's what we're limiting it as well here too. We're kind of going for that first shot, second shot, and cap shot calculation. Here then we have basically two sets of, well, we have this set of tables where the first one is sorted by this first shot. The second one is sorted by this by the cap shot. But then below it as well, we have a second set, basically. And the difference between them is because the build we'll be using has hotshot. This second set is basically the first three shots of hotshot, and then also actually the hotshot amp being active on the second shot. So basically, really from standstill is how we can kind of look at it for this one. And that, of course, yeah, kind of does lower our first shot, especially as well, and our cap shot quite a bit in comparison to what the top one is, and that is having the 20% from hot shot basically continuously active. So you're basically in that cycling mode where it's just continuously giving you all 3 bonuses with each shot. The thing with determined is that yeah, we can kind of actually get this, so it is actually meaningful to kind of have both of the metrics. Then as well, build-wise, we're taking a specific build here as well, Chainkiller+Airaldi. We could have gone Chainkiller+ Gift. The differences between those two is very marginal. I know there's always a lot of debate between the two. The gift version or going, the headshot bonus version would give you a better first shot by basically around 1%, and then you would lose on the cap by about 1%. The thing is, it doesn't meaningfully change the build, as we'll kind of discuss as well once we get to the first shots discussion. It doesn't get you into a new, it doesn't open up any possibilities between the two. Now, of course, the gift does give you vigilance back 1 second faster, but especially for the build pictures that I have, I'm going with the Airaldi one because that's usually easy, just as easy to get as at least not having the named version, because if you put a named version in there, people feel like that's the one that you have to kind of get. And the difference between them is kind of minimal. And I'm kind of going more for the cap than instead of for the first shot. And then as well here, we're putting everything here on grade 27 specifically. So we are kind of, maxing out our output. But of course, you could copy this over to your own Google Drive and kind of play around with some of the numbers. We're leaving out basically fully crit chance. Technically, some crit chance could happen because at the very least, if your watch is maxed out, you have 10 crit chance going, and then you have 45 crit damage. So here and there, you would get a little bit of a buffed shot that way, basically. But we're just leaving that out fully. We're not even kind of taking an average or something of it. Mostly just to keep these numbers kind of testable, because if we were to average this out and kind of feed it back kind of DPS-wise in a DPS way, we wouldn't really be able to kind of use these as testing numbers, because the thing is as well, these numbers will kind of match directly with what is happening in-game, so we can check against that as well. We're keeping headshot, of course, here at 100% with determined. We're kind of going that route. We don't have any DTA, really. We're setting up the hotshot bonuses correctly for each of the tables, of course, that we're kind of going for. For the one that is active, it is at that 20% for all of the shots. On the other one, it is only built into the second shot, basically, to have actually the hotshot bonus, because you would still have it there. Your first shot isn't bonused with damage with hotshot, but your second shot is. So yeah, we're kind of doing that way. And then as well, one of the things that this calculator isn't per se built for is actually having DTA or DTH in there still, because they kind of, the way that they interact with the enemies and kind of how much with the saved amount is, we're just leaving them out and not even considering them at all. I don't want to deal with it. If you want to deal with it, you would have to need to alter this calculator a little bit if you wanted to input some of that. And then, the detox, of course, and such. And then weapon talent wise, we're kind of going with determined. That is kind of the thing here. And then as well, we could, of course, add in other amps. For instance, Ranger is a good option. Optimist is also a decent option because it will also feed into how much your cap shot is for worth and stuff. We're kind of leaving that out of here as well. And then we're basically have this, and then we're repeating it once more with the Habsburg version, which kind of looks exactly the same, but has kind of different numbers here. Let's go look at especially the first build that we're kind of going to go look at and go from there. And build-wise, what we're using is, to make that abundantly clear, is just, the 4-piece hotshot version, going for that hotshot buffs and such as well. There's, of course, many ways you can kind of set this up. We kind of discussed going gift, for instance, instead of this. Honestly, the difference between them is minimal and kind of more just, you could lean one way or the other. I lean on both are good, and the difference between them isn't enough to make any steps or that it might cost you something too much, because, the gift or just a Providence piece with the headshot damage as the bonus. With Vigilance would get you a higher first shot and second shot by extension. And then the Airaldi would get you much higher cap, although, well, not much higher. It is a little bit higher cap. To me, it is basically an academic difference and not really a practical one. And then, yeah, 4-piece of hotshot. We could, of course, for instance, also go like with the 3-piece hotshot and then Fox's Prayer. I much prefer having the 4th-piece hotshot as well, even though that complicates it for us here. We need to kind of split it into 2 tables there. I'd rather do that and kind of have numbers that kind of fit the playstyle that I have, because I do really like the bonuses that it provides, the reloading, the healing, the bonus armor, and then also as well it's bonus damage, of course. And then, as we saw, it is basically with White Deaths, which I've kind of returned as the main weapon to kind of use. That is also the takeaway from all this, is definitely the White Death is the top weapon overall again to pick. And yeah, I'm kind of starting to put some back as well. As for instance, you can see here, this one isn't optimized fully yet, as yeah, all 4 characters of mine are getting White Deaths again. Of course, there though, we're calculating with a grade 27. On second account, I actually do have a grade 27 to kind of check against there as well. So yeah, this is the style that we'll be going for. If we go to its build picture as well, this is on the build collection as 1.01, the very first build of the collection. Its stat block is coming from there, and also what we would see here is that actually the numbers that we have here with grade 25 though, if we were to set the list to grade 25, we would actually have matching numbers with here. So that is the way to also test it. Like an calculator isn't worth its salt unless we actually get matching numbers with the game. The game is always the place we have to check against. As we have here the gift as an option to kind of replace the Airaldi backpack if we were to choose to go that route. And then the other build that we'll be discussing is the infamous double Habsburg. This is, of course, having 2 super unicorns. This is much harder of a build to get together, but actually it does get us over a threshold, as we'll kind of see when we go through it, as this will allow, when we have the bonus of hotshot going as well with the Habsburg, with the grade 25 White Death, to start on an elite, which is the big bonus that this provides you. You can at that point kind of start going and starting with an elite if it's your second shot, or if you're in the mode where hotshot is already cycling. And then, yeah, the Habsburg one is just overall just better, but also just so much harder to get. As yeah, we need to recore blue core versions of these Habsburg pieces. You could just have the headshot there and then not have the weapon handling, but giving up 2 weapon handlings as well will kind of cost you a little bit of comfort with the build. But then, of course, yeah, the bonuses of this is basically much higher. We are giving up perfect headhunter, but that's not really an issue, because we don't really care much about the second shot, which really this comes into play in that, because the first shot and the cap shot is actually going to be higher for both in both versions for this for the Habsburg version. So yeah, that's the 2 builds we'll be looking at. Let's go get started actually looking at what the Chainkiller+Airaldi actually kind of hits for, and let's start getting into it here. First of all, we are as well as always with these not kind of putting the 100% mark where we have it here, for instance, what it's sorted by. Here, we're sorting actually by the White Death, and that's mostly because the 3 above it, the Mantis, the TAC 50, and the Nemesis, have much higher hits, basically. They would squish down all of the numbers here below, making it somewhat harder to kind of see between them in a way. So yeah, we're kind of putting the 100% mark here and kind of letting other things like the Nemesis go way above it. Same for the TAC 50, of course. Here, compared on their first shot potential, we see that actually the talents and such, for instance, for the Mantis, will push them, even though their base is, for instance, here lower than the White Death, it pushes them a little bit higher. That's also the reason why the White Death overall will be one of the better picks, and that is because of course, comes with more headshot on it. It basically has that be its named thing, where it has a little bit more headshot. And that's also why, for instance, if we actually just look at it from like just looking at the base, which is a thing that we usually can kind of do for the purposes of headhunter, especially. The Model 700 would appear to have a higher base, and it does. It does have a little bit higher base, but then of course the White Death has more headshot, and when we kind of calculate that headshot in, going from this 311 to this 337, we see that actually even with usually the cap not being much more dependent on the base damage, especially of the weapon, and then weapon damage as the stat, especially because those go as most into that in comparison to, for instance, headshot or such. But we still see that actually the White Death here is on the first shot higher than the Model 700 just because of its extra headshot amount of its bonus, basically. And then even on the cap shot, it is still higher. The Model 700 here and there might actually jump over it, as we'll kind of see with the cap shot, for instance, here later on, or when we don't have hotshot activated, as we have down there. But for instance, here, even with the hotshot already kind of stacked up, it actually doesn't beat it actually ever. And then together with that, an important thing to kind of consider with these as well, and that's why you would want to have the burst and sustain tables close by as well, is that, yeah, there is magazine size differences between these, and especially as well reload differences. One that I want to kind of highlight is that actually as the base goes down, basically, the reloads actually become much more usable, especially if you kind of look at the SR1s and the Tactical 308s. They have lower bases, but then they have better reloads. But actually the classic M44 here as well, none of them are really horrendous reloads, because basically we have those two that have a little bit better reload, and then a lot of these that are kind of 3.9, and then the Model 700 is still a very long reload as well. But of course it gets 2 shots more, which could be used to, for instance, trigger a hotshot if it was worth it. But we kind of see here that on the Chainkiller+Airaldi, as we have it here, basically the White Death in all modes kind of outdoes it. One of the things to also point out is that this +5 weapon damage that we have here in the magazine slot of the integral magazines. So the White Death has that basically based on the carbine M44 or classic M44 carbine. The Model 700 has that, and then also the hunting M44, where they don't have a magazine slot and they have a mod that is 5 weapon damage. And putting in that 5 weapon damage can be a choice, especially if it can kind of get you over a threshold or something, because it's just more damage. But of course, that does compete. And if we kind of go into the game and kind of look at our White Death, that does nowadays, of course, kind of compete as well against a stability mod here, and then also a reload speed mod that we could kind of go for, which are actually now, of course, much better values than they used to be, because this weapon damage didn't go up at all. So that's why both of them are there, because we could consider it with this and then also without, because if we don't per se need it, which I would say, for instance, with the table that we have there, I would say we don't per se need it, because yeah, we don't really jump any threshold here. We're still with this 9.5 versus this 9.4. This doesn't open up any real opportunities up for us. Neither actually on the first shot as without hotshot as we would have, where it's a 7.9 and a 7.8 basically. So yeah, it doesn't open up any real opportunities up for us in this setting. But that might come into play with the Habsburg in a little bit. And then, yeah, we kind of see the order of the weapons then here as well. We, of course, have the exotics, the Nemesis and the Mantis. The Mantis having a really good buff available to it, which is very strong at 50% of an amp. It does, of course, not go into the cap of Headhunter. Basically, it doesn't increase your cap also by 50% above it. But of course, it does still add into the shot there. That's why, for instance, here we see that it's 129% of basically the White Death here, and then 129%. And then the cap shot is actually just 5% above it. That's because that amp actually doesn't go into Headhunter, into the Headhunter cap calculation. The Nemesis, of course, can do just Nemesis things, charging it up and getting that first shot. Even on that very first shot, if we kind of scroll down here, and we'll be kind of swapping between the two, because yeah, this is then the hotshot inactive start basically here. We're even there with a charged shot. We're starting just on 16 million right away, enough to basically kill up to an elite LMG as well. And that is very important, of course. That can be a very nice opener. Same for the TAC 50 as well. The TAC 50, of course, actually let us, trying to get it to work in this calculator, led us down a little bit of a path to trying to explore what the hell was going on with specialization weapons, which, at least for the TAC 50 and kind of the minigun, we kind of solved. The rest, still not really. Because, yeah, if we kind of just look at its base is way lower, but then it's hitting way harder. So something was up. There's a whole video on that if you want to go in depth into that. But for here, we'll just leave it at, we kind of had to solve it to kind of have these numbers add up and kind of work as they do. And yeah, the TAC 50 as well is a very good tool, of course. Sharpshooter, picking sharpshooter together with these builds is kind of a no-brainer quite often. So yeah, going with this, going and using the specialization weapon is kind of a good way as well to open up. And that's usually how people use it, of course, as well. One thing we see with the Mantis is when it is active, it is actually starting on a pretty good shot, especially if we kind of go back down again on actual first shots. We see that the Mantis here is kind of hitting a 10 million, which is enough to start on an elite, for instance. But without, it is actually dropping down quite far. So if the enemy is targeting you, this is basically just above the amounts that we would need for a purple. Also to actually talk about what I base that upon, we have here this little list here. I'll actually, maybe we'll stay zoomed in for a second still. So this is for solo heroic. I just, as a cheat sheet, put this here for myself kind of as well. With their health and armors combined for a red, for a purple, for a yellow enemy and a named. And how much in millions basically they have. This comes directly from, and this is then for assaulters, especially because, of course, yeah, snipers and rushers have less, LMG guys have more. It does differ from enemy types, but especially the assaulters and then grenadiers / throwers, they kind of fit this archetype kind of. They have a little bit more though, usually the grenadiers. And yeah, what we have is this very old one. I'll link it as well down below, which is although still old but still accurate because they didn't ever really alter this, which is the Division 2 level 40 NPC health pools, as it says up there, which is made long ago by somebody else. I don't actually know who to credit for this. Does it actually say? No. I was wondering if it actually had a name maybe on it. And then yeah, we're basically taking heroic one player solo and kind of taking these numbers from here, and yeah, they do kind of align with the game. You can kind of as well with the range kind of test what these numbers are, because you can set the range to all of these with the scaling, and the scaling does apply there as well. And yeah, this as well can be used to kind of look at 4-player and then even, for instance, as well for legendary enemies. But yeah, so we're just taking that as a heroic for our heroic numbers, just to compare. And basically the few thresholds that we really care about is actually this 6.36 that we kind of have here, and then as well this 9.89. Going over these, so being basically over 6.5, usually I don't remember it like this. Well, being more than 3 is enough for a red, although more than enough, basically 2.5 would be enough. But then here, the purple would be 3.6, 3.36. I generally just remember it as 6.5. And then just being under 10 million is enough for the elite. And the thing is, of course, we want to, if we have that opportunity, we want to basically start on an elite if we were to be able to set that up. And honestly, in no way is the Chainkiller+Airaldi able to get to that point from just the white debt, for instance, because we wouldn't want a weapon swap or such. So the effect of that is yeah, that we're not going over that threshold. We're not with the Chainkiller+Airaldi. That is also what actually the two-piece Habsburg has over this, where we can actually reach the point where if we're in the in a buffed shot of hotshot, we can kind of see that we just barely go over an elite. And then here, we have then the other weapons kind of showing up. So yeah, the Model 700, as we saw, the White Death really kind of just outshines it as well. It is overall a faster reloader, and actually the reload of the White Death has been reduced a little bit, and it is noticeable, and kind of you can main it now, especially of course remembering that on hotshot we have a ton of weapon handling. Then we basically have the classic M44 carbine, which is the non-White Death White Death. Basically, you wouldn't ever really want to use that. The White Death exists. It is just better. All it has is that it doesn't have that extra headshot damage that we would have. So you wouldn't really go with that. Then we have the hunting M44. The hunting M44 is the integral mag one. The only reason we're kind of splitting it off as well from the custom M44, because all of those actually do have the same base, these hunting M44s. One of the reasons is that we can have put that 5 weapon damage mod in there. Going with that, we kind of separate it from the custom M44, which is a magazine one. But then also, yeah, they have different mag sizes and such, so we're kind of separating them out for that reason, even though they have the same base, these two. Because with the other ones, with the Model 700 and the SRS, we're actually combining the variants. Overall, yeah, the carbon is much better than the tactical, especially as well as it has a mod slot on the tactical M700. We have a mod slot that can really only be crit chance, which is kind of useless because it's a side mount mod slot. And then on the SRS, both are very usable. The A1 is kind of better handling overall. Once we kind of pass actually the integral mag ones, I would generally just, none of these really, not the Model 700 nor the hunting M44 has really a reason to kind of exist over the White Death, just because that named version kind of outcompetes them. With the magazine ones though, overall their reload is a little bit more consistent and faster, especially when we kind of consider the SR1 and the Tactical 308. Their reloads is much faster, and also generally they get to have more mod slots positions. So that what we get is the magazine, of course, yeah, we're just extending that usually, but we could even in there with some of these, with SRSs, for instance, having 7 rounds, we could actually stay with those 7 rounds and put nowadays a stability mag in there. Although with the increases to stability and such, one of the things was in the past we would take all stability mods on SR1 to kind of take the sway all the way out of it. What you generally do now is actually take stability on one spot and then put the rest into accuracy. If you push accuracy quite high, what stability does is actually decrease the sway. And then what accuracy does is when you're running around and stop and aim, that is how quick it kind of snaps back, that is accuracy. Plus as well, how much flinch, if enemies are shooting at you, yeah, basically at the moment that is shooting at you, it kind of spreads. How quickly it comes back from that is also accuracy. So we can actually nowadays put just basically one stability mod and multiple accuracy mods to kind of bump up those. As well, going, for instance, with some reload if you maybe want to go that route, but I wouldn't per se. Thing is as well, nowadays with the White Death, then as well, we can kind of do the same. With just one stability mag, we can, with one stability underbarrel, we can already make this completely swayless. Looking at the first shot numbers as well, then we kind of see that, yeah, it's basically just going down. And especially if we kind of go to from standstill without the hotshot buff up, all of the weapons that we kind of have here, including the Tactical 308, clear this threshold. When vigilance is up, clear this threshold of a purple, and none of them kind of come close at all of a threshold of an elite. So we don't really gain that much from going some of the higher weapons. So there is actually a case to be made here to go for comfort. And one of the most comfortable guns, for instance, here is also the Tactical 308. So what then kind of becomes the conclusion to maybe kind of have around this is, especially for the first shot on the Chainkiller+Airaldi version as we have here, White Death is definitely the hardest hitter. We can go with that as our main gun and just hit as hard as possible, especially if you're also doing it with group scaling and such. This can be very useful. But even solo, the harder we hit, sometimes rogue spawns, they can take a little bit more of a beating. Sometimes you just have harder enemies around that you want to kind of deal with. So then though, if we kind of aren't going with that integral mag version, what we can go with is any basically of the bolt actions with a magazine, and kind of also layer them up with both stability and accuracy, and especially the SR1 and the tactical 308, because we're not really gaining a threshold shot on the first part. We could go with any of those and kind of have a much more comfortable weapon, especially the SR1 and the tactical 308. One of the things as well, once you fire, where it returns when you scope in with the tactical 308 is basically exactly where you left it after a shot, which is kind of nice. And then overall, yeah, the Nemesis, the TAC 50, and the Mantis can be chosen as the need arises. The Nemesis, of course, really hard hitting. The TAC 50, you kind of always have it, and is a really good tool to start off with as well. And then the Mantis, especially if you're not using Determined, is one of the top picks as well. Let's go look at the cap shot as well briefly on this build, and then we'll continue on to the Habsburg. And to kind of as well jump into the cap shot before we move on to the Habsburg. Especially on this second list, of course, we're sorting by that. One of the things is that basically all of them, if we can as well keep that in range for the names, it's around 19 million, although it is around like 27-ish million, actually just a little bit above, or well, these are just a little bit above that for especially LMG guys. So for instance, when you have an Outcast LMG named, they'll have in just under what the tactical 308 as a cap shot can do. So you're still kind of fine even with them with this. But of course, what we kind of care about the cap shot is more so as well. For instance, if we're using it in a group setting, you could kind of cross-reference this with that health list for maybe if you're wanting to use it in 4-man or even in legendary or such, to kind of get an idea how high some of these cap shots differences will be. And especially to see if any of them kind of go over a threshold that you needed to go over. Because that's the thing. Usually, for instance, some of the builds that I use, hybridizing Headhunter, we kind of end up around the 20 million mark. And that might be, for instance, enough for most of the names, but then not enough for an LMG named, for instance. And yeah, that's kind of important to kind of keep in mind. But what we also kind of see is that the range from the White Death here, going all the way to the Tactical 308, is basically just a 3 million difference. There isn't that much that lives in this that would be killed by this, but wouldn't be killed by this. So you could kind of go with some of the other weapons. Them bringing a lot of the weapons kind of together, especially the magazine-based bolt action ones, kind of makes it, especially for those, in my opinion, kind of just pick whichever one you kind of like the look of. Any of them is basically on the first shot and on the cap shot pretty good. If you had a graded SR1, great, just keep using that. Grab a White Death if you're kind of maybe more in a group setting and kind of want that highest hit, or if in general you just want that highest hit. But then as well, the White Death is now kind of just fine enough, especially because of its reload being so much faster with enough weapon handling that we have on this build. The reload actually of the White Death is actually a stated 275 basically, and that's that clip reload, which is basically a 3-second reload, which is still, in comparison to ARs and stuff, pretty long, but in comparison to the old like MMRs, it's actually not that long. And then of course we have five shots to kind of create the 3-shot of the third shot bonus of hotshot and trigger a reload that way. So honestly, it's kind of hard to go like, this is the weapon to pick here. It really depends on kind of what you're doing. You can kind of use these numbers and kind of cross-reference them over, but especially as well on even without the hotshot buff active on the cap shot. So this is basically the first 3 shots we would take. Most of the weapons will still be enough, but actually even here, for instance, none of the magazine ones is above that 27 million that we would need kind of for that LMG guy. That this is might be, for instance, a reason to kind of go with the white dead. Here we also actually see that actually it is swapped here. The white dead is no longer the 100% point. It is actually the model 700, but the model 700 is a tiny bit above it. It is basically less than 50k. Yeah, less than 50k. A difference there on the cap shot. But then actually, when we look here, it is 4% behind the white dead. And this is the reason why, yeah, the model 700 really just don't pick anymore. Even though, yeah, if you were to just look at base, you would think that would be one of the better choices. But yeah, the white dead's headshot kind of comes in and kind of puts an end to that. But then, yeah, on the cap shots here as well, we're kind of high enough that we're not really struggling to deal with most enemies. The white dead would actually, on this third shot, be able to still kill a named LMG solo. But then, for instance, actually the tactical 208 would be below it. Although actually all the magazine-based ones would be the custom M44 is the highest base damage of those. And yeah, even that is not reaching that 27 million cap. But actually, it might be a little bit below 27 million, so this might actually be able to reach there. Yeah, let's take it now from this to the Habsburg version as we swap tables, and just a lot of numbers change there. But yeah, let's go have a look at this. And yeah, here we have swapped our tabs over, and we're now on the two-piece Habsburg version. And of course, the two-piece Habsburg version overall is just better, but it's also so much harder to get. That's also why even on main account, where I was showing that build, I don't actually have, I do have actually, well, two Chainkiller, or as a replacement for the Chainkiller+Airaldi, I do have two-piece Habsburg, but they are headshot and then just something else, headshot crit chance, I believe, with the right talents, vigilance, and headhunter, but I don't actually have the two-piece Habsburg. I have that only on my second account, and also to kind of give, yeah, how hard that is to get together. Overall, for me, it costs around 18k watch points, which on that account was kind of like 3 watch alts worth, and also a bunch of time just sitting there buying from the vendors, deconstructing that, crafting from those crafted crafting components, hoping to get lucky, and then, you know, just cycling that. And yeah, that took a while of time, and of course, yeah, as well, getting those watch alts together. All that to say, it is a better version of the build. If it's worth it is a separate discussion, because yeah, if you don't have the resources to put into that and try to get that two-piece Habsburg, the other one is just fine. But there is one thing that we kind of gain here, as we were talking about elites, 9.89 here, the white dead plus that 5 weapon damage mod. If we have hotshot on the second shot, or if we have hotshot kind of cycling already, we clear that threshold. We go to 9.979. And this is what the thing that the Habsburg kind of gains over the Chainkiller+Airaldi. We just barely can clear that if we kind of set up correctly, and especially with Determined, as is with here, we clear that threshold. We would need that 5 weapon damage mod in here. That's also the reason why on the Habsburg version, I specifically go out of my way to have that 5 weapon damage mod in there, because actually without it, even if we were in that second shot, kind of, we're just below it, basically. So yeah, we need that 5 weapon damage mod here. So if you're kind of running a two-piece Habsburg as well, like me, yeah, make sure, grab a white dead, put that 5 weapon damage mod in there. If you are in the right circumstances, the second shot of hotshot, or the fourth or the fifth shot or further, then yeah, you can just start an elite, which is really nice, especially if you're doing control points and stuff. You can just drop an elite right away instead of going with something else. But then, yeah, without that, we wouldn't reach that. We kind of see the exact same order, of course, weapon-wise between them. The Nemesis, the TAC 50, and the Mandis kind of showing up again in that same order. The Nemesis, of course, kind of going into outer space, basically, if you were to main it. Starting even with 20 million with the very first shot. For an assault named basically any non-LMG, non-heavy, you could actually, with the Nemesis, just pull this out. And if you have the cycling shot kind of up, then yeah, you can if you have the hotshot buff up, basically, you can actually start even with the Nemesis and just drop the name right away, which is kind of cool, of course. And then, yeah, we see the exact same order weapon-wise and kind of the same conclusion as well for this build for as that. Yes, yeah, that we really want to go with the White Deaths, really, if we want all-out damage. And then here, the White Death as well affords us a threshold where we're moving up just over being able to start on elites with the right circumstances. But yeah, that's of course a lot of caveats we're putting in here. And then yeah, cap wise, we're kind of capping a little bit higher as well, because we have more MMR damage. The second shot of note is actually a little bit lower, but in all of these, not low enough that it matters much. Although you might consider that, for instance, this SR1 on its second shot can't kill a named, so you can't go purple and then named. So for instance, which would be for if you're encountering a named group with the White Death, for instance, we could go, if we have the buff up, we could go actually with an elite even, but yeah, then purple because he's surrounded by purples. The second shot could kill the named as long as it's not a heavy or LMG. But the SR1 couldn't. But there's, of course, there's 4 purples around a named in a named group. So you'll just grab one of those extra and then. But it is important to kind of, yeah, know your first shot, your second shot, and your cap shot kind of, so you can kind of make those kind of decisions. If we kind of look at the cap shots by themselves, it is kind of the same order, although, of course, for instance, here we see this Model 700 kind of creep in between the 2 White Deaths as they were on the bases. But yeah, again, we kind of see that just in all of its shots here with the hotshot buff up, the Model 700 actually doesn't even get to beat the White Death if we have that buff cycling. If we kind of scroll down, we see that, yeah, the Model 700 here then again does beat the White Death just by a tiny amount on this cap, but yeah, it loses in all of the other categories, and this amount is just barely anything. So yeah, not worth going that route just because it has a higher base. If we as well look at it without having the hotshot buff up, we no longer, of course, have that ability to kind of go with an elite as we had. Because yeah, we'll need to reach basically 9.9. But yeah, still all of these weapons in this setup are more than high enough to down a purple to start with. All control points as well always will have a purple, so you can always drop that one first. The second shot is of course more than enough for for anything following that. The cap shot as well with all of these is of course a little bit higher. Here some of the weapons, so like the hunting M44 or the custom M44, I should say, this actually does clearly like go over that 27 million, which some of the LMG names will have. Although it is actually a little bit under 27 million, so likely this 994 would also beat it, but the 7 might be getting close. But then, especially at 26.4, likely won't actually go over that, but then yeah, you would be weakening them enough for a follow-up shot to kind of kill them. But yeah, that's kind of important to kind of look at, and kind of as well as, yeah, here is really the only place where the Model 700 does kind of cap out higher, but yeah, it's not meaningful in any way. Just go with a White Death. That is the order of things nowadays. Yeah, let's take this now then actually to the stash, and we'll do our review over there. And yeah, let's actually have a review as we go through every MMR that we have available in the game, and kind of discuss them one by one. I have actually one of each just for testing purposes, and of course, actually just putting those tables together, we kind of need the base damages and such for them. And that means having one of each variant, and I've gone out of my way to have basically one of every weapon for the DPS tables. And here as well, we'll discuss the automatic weapons, even though we didn't really touch on them on the table there with the headhunter specifically, but we can kind of say our piece on them. Then starting as well with the Dread Edict at the start. Overall, the Dread Edict is actually, out of the auto-firing options, it is kind of usable. This talent of it is not too terrible. You can kind of make it work, especially still with focus aces and such. But well, you can kind of make it work. It works, but it isn't the greatest pick. Overall as well, the SVD is kind of the only one where we can actually, with a little bit of weapon handling, which this weapon gladly is, and yeah, it is good that it has it. We're very glad about that. It has a little bit of weapon handling here. But yeah, especially the SVD, for instance, with some mods, you can actually make it somewhat usable in just an auto sense, so that you can get all of the shots out. Dread Edict, not per se. You can't really fire it at its full RPM without it actually its bloom kind of getting in the way of your shots. But you can actually just be a little bit under its RPM, and then it's kind of fine. Or especially as well, using it on a build which has a little bit of weapon handling alongside of it. Overall, the Dread Edict out of the auto-firing ones is really one of the picks that you could go with that is actually usable, because of course, yeah, the other one we'll see in a second isn't that much. The Mantis with its talent is very much, if you're not going determined, is one of the great picks to have. One thing we didn't even discuss here is this first part, which is that it shows basically heads. It shows who is and isn't targeting you. It put a circle over their head. But what that also does is basically show where all the heads are in front of you. And you might think to yourself, why would I need that? I can see the heads. Can you? In a sandstorm, in rain, in summit, with the fog and everything. It is very much a useful tool just to know where the enemies are. And kind of, how many are in front of you and how you're kind of having to deal with them. Its talent, of course, is kind of contingent on enemies not targeting you. You can, of course, yeah, it gives you a buff for the decoy to kind of help with that as well. Running this with the decoy, you can definitely make it work pretty consistently. Though, yeah, the way that we kind of use that hotshot headhunter setup, Determined is one of the great tools to make that super easy, of course. But yeah, if you don't want to go Determined, Mantis is definitely one of the top picks. As we kind of saw, without its talent up, it is pretty low, but quite consistent. You have to just kind of get consistent with trying to have the talent up as much as you can, with having, for instance, yeah, using a decoy and just getting the aggro off of you. Nemesis can do Nemesis things with its charging mechanic. It is kind of annoying, of course, to kind of main, but with its very high damage potential, not much except for the TAC 50 really comes close to really actually making the same high numbers happen. And as we kind of saw, even with the Habsburg version, we could actually, if we are in the bonus, in the point where the hotshot bonus is active, we can even start on a named, which is of course kind of insane almost. Then we come to the Sacrum. The Sacrum boat kind of has the downside of not having too much weapon handling stats on it, stability-wise, being based on the G28, which is a weapon that really jumps around way too much. Both the G28 and the SOCOM Mark 20 really jump around way too much to use them really at full automatic, except if you were to like put all accuracy mods on them and such. But of course, this is an exotic, and we don't really get to do that at all with this. Then as well, the talent itself is not that useful. It really requires way too much of a charge up time for what it is, because you need to mark enemies with the crosshair basically, and then you can then set them on fire basically by killing one of the marked targets, and it also needs to be with a headshot, which I can actually, it's very awkward to get that talent going. But also the base weapon by itself is not really worth it. What we'll include here as well, in the middle of all of the exotics, is actually, of course, the TAC 50. The TAC 50, if you're going this route, you generally want to go sharpshooter anyway, if nothing else as well, for the recon drone, which is a very, very useful tool, as well for the extra headshot and the extra stability that the specialization provides, and of course as well the TAC 50 itself. The TAC 50 is one of the great specialization weapons, and yeah, as we kind of saw there, especially for an opening shot or such, it can hit out really, really hard. Its cap shot as well is pretty potent. Kind of, it's second to the Nemesis. The downside of it though is, and why I quite often then do still use the Nemesis, especially if I'm using it for doing control points, is that this has reduced damage against named enemies. It basically gets halved against named enemies. and rogues, basically. Whenever I get rogues at a control point, that is really the reason why I run a nemesis secondary, because then we can kind of quickly deal with those rogues, as well as if I were to be at cap and kind of get a nemesis shot out, that will quite often weaken one of the rogues to very low numbers, letting me finish them off and then kind of put a second shot into the next enemy with a little bit of a bonus. So yeah, that is one of the reasons that this has its issue, but it's mostly just the named enemies. For opening onto enemies, it is a very good tool. Hitting one with this, swapping over to a white death, getting a headshot with this to be indeterminate, and then just not swapping from that point onward. Yeah, let's continue on with our high-end weapons. And starting with the classic M44 carbine, the non-named version of the White Death, basically. The classic M44 carbine, you really shouldn't ever really grab at all. It is just well, if you have the White Death, of course. If you just have a perfect one of this, maybe go with it. But then actually, yeah, it would lose to the Model 700. But yeah, what we mostly will then do, of course, is just go with the White Death. And yeah, the White Death is very much back being at that on top again. Here as well on this build with hotshot, where it's a pretty quick reload. The reload actually got reduced for it, so it's a faster reload nowadays. We do get, of course, that named version of it, basically having the headshot damage be higher. The White Death is the go-to, and as we saw as well with the Habsburg, it actually, with the 5 damage mod in there, it actually clears a threshold and kind of gets us just above where we can start on Elite, which actually in past seasons, then the SR1, for instance, was one of the few, SR1 and the Model 700 were the only two that could do that as well, to start on Elite if you had hotshot cycling, basically. Now it's only really the White Death, and yeah, you do need this 5 damage mod in there. If you're not going for that, yeah, this 5 weapon damage mod, you could actually swap out for some more accuracy or stability in that slot. Moving on to next door, which is the SRS. And here, the covert SRS will actually include into that as well the normal SRS A1, which are both very close to the SR-1 as well. But yeah, these two are variants of each other. They are basically the same base weapon. Overall, the stability is a little bit better on the short one, but both of them as well. You just load them up with stability and accuracy mods and kind of get them to very usable places. Both of them are very usable with all of the sort of the bolt action magazine based ones. We can kind of say all of them are so close to each other that you can, it's more of an aesthetic choice. Which weapon skin do you kind of like for them if you have a specific weapon skin? None of them really jump any thresholds. The handling of the SR1 and the SR-1 and the tactical 308, I would say, is overall better, and that is especially when you fire. The scope kind of stays in the same position once you scope in again, if you're not moving your mouse at all. That does make a little bit of difference. They are a little bit more comfortable. The custom M44, as we'll have in a second, that one actually is the highest cap of them, but all of them are so close to each other that it's basically more of a personal choice than really any of them being really markedly better. Although, yeah, moving on to the custom M44, it is markedly better. Although, yeah, I don't end up using this that much. If I'm kind of going for that cap, if I'm going for a higher base, we're already going to move towards the White Death, really. If I'm using the bolt actions, I have a bunch of SR1s that are graded and such, so we're kind of using them as well quite often. Technically, this would be the highest base, so the highest of the magazine-based bolt actions that kind of has the highest move first shot and the highest cap, but not really in a meaningful way. Handling-wise as well, all of them are pretty close to each other, but we could definitely say that the SR-1 and the Tactical 308 are kind of a little bit better handling. As well with that, the rate of fire as well of the Tactical 308 is just a little bit more as well. The custom M44 actually has a little bit lower rate of fire with 55 versus the 60 that the SRSs and the SR-1s have. But honestly, we're not firing them at their RPMs. Their RPM being once per second, basically. And this is just a little bit better than once per second. Yeah, it is not a meaningful difference there. One of the names to actually do call out here, especially if you don't want to use Determined, is that Perfect Ranger as well kind of got a little bit of a buff with the Ranger buff as well. It also went down more by 1 meter. Making the Ekim's long stick, actually, if you are using, if you don't want to use Determined, then this might actually edge out a little bit the White Death. The thing to remember, though, is that this does not increase the cap either. This is a separate multiplier. This will help the first shot and the second shot quite a bit, but it will actually not increase the cap because this is not weapon damage, nor total weapon damage, nor DTA, nor DTH, which is the only things that actually really increase the cap as a stat. This being an amp, actually, yeah, still keeps it that the cap is actually pretty close to the White Death with Determined, without the damage down. But of course, yeah, it does help the first shots. And as well, with this, you could also very much clear that threshold to start on Elite, especially if you're kind of keeping your distance and such. This could also be a good opener weapon, but yeah, I just generally pair it with just a Nemesis, and the Nemesis definitely will go through an Elite on the first shot. But yeah, the Model 700 by itself, as the counterpart to that, the non-named version, yeah, and it very much is not worth really considering. It does have 2 shots more, and it does allow for the muzzle, which is a 40 stability instead of the 30, but you do lose a little bit of optimal range. But overall, yeah, not per se, and one of the reasons why I also have 2 in here, because yeah, one of them basically went off of a character and back into here. Continuing on with the G28, as one of the outer firing ones, it very much is just not really usable at full auto, and that makes it that it's not really usable at all, really. Aces, for instance, would benefit from having more faster firing weapons, but now also we have rifles to do that, as Rifles works on it. And if we were going to go for the faster firing versions, the SVD is really the only one that we can make really handleable in that situation, where if we put a few handling mods on there, then that's kind of usable. Neither this G28 nor the Mark 20 is really usable at full auto, even with a bunch of mods and a little bit of weapon handling going into it. Then we have the Hunting M44, which is the counterpart to the custom M44 as we kind of had. They do actually have the same base. This then has the integral mag. That's also kind of why they're split up from each other in that way. With that integrated magazine slot, we do get to put 5 weapon damage here. But as we kind of saw, the White Death kind of beats out all of the bolt action integral mags that we kind of have. It really doesn't have anything to be above that, so we just kind of just forget about it. Then we come to the M700s. Same with as with the other bolt action magazine based ones. This one is very much in the middle of the pack, kind of. It is underneath the custom M44 on base. It has 2 shots more, and then has a little bit longer reload actually than the custom M44. But honestly, again, one that, yeah, if you kind of it's more, do you like this carbon skin that it has? Go for that if you have it as well, of course. But otherwise, yeah. It isn't a meaningful difference between the two to kind of really discuss over. But then we do also have, which is a variant as well, with having the same base stats as the carbons, which is the tactical. But on the tactical, we actually have the sight slot here. And this slot actually does not allow for really anything except crit chance, which is not really a useful stat, of course. So with the model, with this M700 carbon, we can actually on that underbarrel put an accuracy mod or a stability mod. Here we really can't, and that is actually, that will make it so that you shouldn't really pick this one. If you want to go for the M700s, unless you really like the look and are willing to give up a little bit of handling, you would want to go with the M700 carbon. Then we have the SVD. The SVD is, of the auto-firing ones, the only real usable one, especially if you kind of, like here, kind of slap it with some stability on it. You can kind of use it, especially also if the build also has a little bit. But it doesn't really do anything better than rifles, especially as well. Its bonus really being just the headshot, where we have a little bit more headshot than rifles would be. Base-wise, it just doesn't make sense. So if we're kind of looking at it from a base DPS sense, its bonus as well, kind of as with rifles, isn't the greatest. So it kind of gets outclassed if we were to want to use it, for instance, as just a rifle in the way that we would use a rifle. Especially then as well, if we're kind of using it then in the DPS sense, which we're kind of more going to lean on to when we're just firing it at full auto. Then the stability mags or the stability mods kind of are a detriment to it because we have a good chance crit damage there, but it is still usable. This and the Dread Edict are really the only usable out of firing ones, in my opinion. The other ones, including this Mark 20, as we have here, SOCOM Mark 20 SSR, they and the G28 alongside of it, they jump around way too much. Even putting a bunch of stability mods on it and such really doesn't help it, especially as well as they kind of also lack in accuracy as well. So even slapping all accuracy, then you still don't really get the accuracy out of it that you would want. So those autos are not that useful. Then the SR1 used to be the old king, basically. That's the pre this season. We would use basically this and the Model 700. Now though, it is definitely outclassed by the White Death again. But in the bolt actions, it's kind of as I said with the other ones, it's kind of, if you like the skin. So for instance, this one I have the the Outcast skin for it. I kind of like that. We'll kind of use it. It does have a little bit better reload rate than some of the other magazine-based ones, which isn't that meaningful, especially if we're kind of using it on hotshot, where we're going to have that reload anyway. And also the White Death already kind of reloads fast enough, because this is a 2.0. The White Death, which for instance the O'Carroll would also kind of be similar to, is a 2.9, which is second more, which isn't the several seconds that it used to be in the past. SR1, especially if you have a graded one, still very usable as well. And a little bit more comfortable than some of the other ones. Then moving on as well, the SVDs as well, we should point out that, there's two versions of it. The Paratrooper overall is the better pick between them. But again, this one, not that usable. Then we do have actually the Tactical 308. One of the things that the Tactical 308 also has is that it actually has a little bit more RPM. So the bolt action ones basically go 55 to 70. Some of them are 55, some of them are 60, like the SRSs, and then this is 70. You do feel that there is a little bit faster per shot, but you give that up in base as well. And what we kind of saw as well is that sometimes it just doesn't reach high enough to, for instance, hit one of the LMG guys in a one shot, basically. That is kind of a downside, but this one is overall the best handling one as well. So it really feels nice to use. It really, when you fire and then come back from cycling the bolt, it is basically in that same position still if you weren't touching the mouse at all. And that is kind of nice to have and very usable as well. But kind of with the same other ones, it's kind of which one you like the look of the most. They are very much in the same ballpark. So we can kind of go with that. Although, of course, the very best one, we're saving the best for last. And we should have totally had it on that list. Although it is basically a White Death, of course, but with the twinkling lights talent fixed upon it there, which is the O'Carroll. And O'Carroll. Carol. Carol is very nice. And her twinkling lights will bring you a lot of joy. And definitely as well, now the White Death being on top again. Though Carol is actually very usable, especially if you just want to have some fun and you are willing to give up the tournament, but you don't per se need that much more damage because then you have some of the other options, of course. But instead of damage, why not have explosions? Right. Let's go to our conclusion here and round things out. And to conclude this very long video, of course, once again, as they are in-depth looks. You knew what you signed up for. And the really thing that we can take away from all of this is that the White Death is very much on top again. especially if you're just going for all-out damage. And then handling wise and such, especially now with the stability mod already being 30, with just this stability mod here, this the White Death on a hotshot build as well, just becomes swayless as well, just as much as with the SR1, which is one of the things that I really liked last season, to being able to make the marksman rifles, or the marksman rifles that we could pick, like the SR1. That one we could make with 3 stability mods. We could make it basically sway free, just because it had more mod slots to put those in. Now we can do that just with 1 mod, just because this mod is now 30% by itself, and the White Death is then just basically swayless, which is very nice. We can kind of as well consider what we want to put here, especially on the Habsburg. We would go with this 5 weapon damage mod, but without, we could actually take the stability here and then maybe have an accuracy mod on the underbarrel to kind of help how quickly we snap our back to accuracy, to full accurate shots again, especially after moving or getting shot at or such. And yeah, the White Death is very much the top pick overall for general use with Determined, especially, of course. If we're not going with Determined, the Nemesis, of course, always a pick. The Mantis, as well, as we kind of saw, very much a usable weapon, and that's also why, for instance, on most of my characters that have headhunters, I'll usually have the Nemesis, and I'll usually have a Mantis as well. And then, yeah, we're gonna very much go with White Deaths, or as well the bolt action magazine based ones, as for instance here I have that at the ready as well, for instance, for myself on this character, which is the custom M44. Here we're kind of going for, you know, all out damage, so we're kind of picking the highest, the base damage one, even though the differences, as we kind of saw, were very minimal, and yeah, it doesn't per se matter between them. And then as well, the TAC 50, of course, always a really great tool to have there as well. So yeah, with this as well, we round out going through all of the weapon types as we rounded, having all of them as they were kind of done for a little bit, as we'll go into the burst and sustain table, even though this technically isn't the burst and sustain table, of course, as we're kind of doing headhunter stuff. But yeah, this one as well, of course, will be linked down below. But yeah, all of the other ones are done at this point as well, where we've released them all. So we've gone through all weapon types, and I'm quite happy about that, kind of catching up almost a lot halfway through the season, basically, and then we're done with them. But yeah, that does open up now to just move on to other things, and yeah, I have a bunch of stuff planned. For future videos, we'll be going especially into the Lengmo Pestilence build showcase, as we kind of saw. Together as well, we'll likely have Character 4 and Character 5 still show up with their build collection updates, as that is also completely, the updates to the collections are done. We just need to put those into recordings, of course. So yeah, those will be all in the future. And yeah, I hope you join me for those. And also, if you did enjoy this video, yeah, please do any and all of the algorithm things down below. It is always very much appreciated. And yeah, I hope to catch you in those future videos. And as always, have a good night.